Sometimes I'm known as the Chibi Robo guy, which I think is kind of funny because I haven't talked about Chibi Robo in like over 5 years now. But yeah, I made a few videos a while ago, and apparently people liked it quite a bit. And I have kind of a complicated history with those series of videos, but once in a blue moon, somebody will reach out to me and be like, hey, I watched those videos and I enjoyed them. And one of those people apparently was Michael Pearce, who reached out to me to let me know that not only did he enjoy the video, but he also had made his own Chibi Robo-esque game. And it was actually coming out pretty soon. I think I had seen it before, and I initially didn't really look at it too much, because I think if you know me, I'm not huge into like kind of spiritual successor kind of games. So I was kind of curious, but it's rare anybody ever contacts me about any of this kind of stuff. So it's like, sure, I'll check it out. I'll look at your video game. And I gave it a look, and I was actually really pleasantly surprised because despite being kind of in some ways labeled as a Chibi Robo successor, I found it to be a very different type of experience that generally focused on being its own game first, but bringing in some values from the Chibi Robo franchise and kind of applying that in different and unique ways to this game. So it is first and foremost a 3D platformer similar to like a Super Mario 3D game or something like that, or a Banjo-Kazooie or something along those lines, right? But I think where it most reflects Chibi Robo is kind of in its narrative, but the way it kind of like tells its story and about like the story about spreading happiness and things like that is a little bit more direct, and I think a little bit more faster paced in a way that I think focuses on its message of kind of like spreading kindness and things like that. So I wanted to talk to Michael about their video game and, you know, the process of making it. So we kind of go into the actual game itself up front and like the actual development process. But then we also want to talk a little bit about like, you know, when you're making a game that is kind of pushing a particular type of message, you know, how do you do that in a way that resonates with your audience? So you're a lead developer. And I guess maybe in the way, because this is a small team, right? You said 3 people, I think is what you told me before. And I know there's more names in the credits, so other people did work on it, I believe. I'm kind of curious, like, how does that come together exactly? Like, are you the person who kind of like went and looked for people? Or is this like, how did this project even form in the first place?
So it was very dynamic. So basically a few years ago, even before this, like I'd say maybe, oh gosh, I've been working on this game for 5 years now, so close to 8 years ago. I actually found a lot of the developers I know through different projects. So one of the projects I did was a fan project where I basically used it to learn game development with a team. And that project was all about recreating the park from Jurassic World, because I'm like obsessed with Jurassic Park since I was a kid. Really, you know, being involved with that community. And I was like, I want to kind of use this as a way to learn 3D modeling and learn game development and stuff like that. So I actually worked on that for around 3 years with all these different people from the community. And one of the people who I found through that was our music composer for Misc. So I've been working with him for, you know, multiple years, nearly a decade now, just from that project alone. And then when it came time to start working on something commercial and of my own, I got him on board, and that's kind of how that came about. But yeah, a lot of it's very sort of dynamic. Like obviously as the lead developer, I'm definitely the one kind of seeking out who to work on the project and stuff. But yeah, you know, they had a fantastic role and input in the game. Bernard was our music composer, so he does all the incredible music, works on the songs and everything in the game. And then Chris is our 2D artist, so he really helped with like the character designs, some story ideas, and all of the little like stamps that you get in the game. They're all like hand drawn by him. So it was so fun to like collaborate with them and get that together.
I'm kind of so the thing that you mentioned was like the Jurassic Park project thing, or that was 8 years ago, is what you said, or is that when Misc started?
It was like 2015
Okay.
when the Jurassic World movie came out. So like that's when we started it, and then it took about 3 years to finish that project. So
correct me if I'm wrong, was Jurassic Park in kind of a lull until then? Because I feel like today I hear about Jurassic Park a lot. I say this to somebody who I don't know anything about Jurassic Park. Never really involved. It was like kid dinosaurs were cool, right? But you know, whatever. Like what? Like it was that a time of like Jurassic Park lacking of Jurassic Park extinction. I don't know, but
Absolutely.
yeah,
Like
because I feel
with
like now I
the
see like
community.
Jurassic Park is breaking the box office, and I don't keep up with this. So I don't know what's happening, but
Oh yeah. So back then, like you had like three movies come out: Jurassic Park, The Lost World, and Jurassic Park 3.
Mhm.
And then there was literally like a 14-year break where nothing was produced at all. So the only movie that came out after was Jurassic World in 2015, and that's when
Okay,
like the community was like, "Oh my God, finally a new movie." And you had like this really big sort of thing happen there, and that, like I said, for us, that was a really interesting way to kind of upskill ourselves
yeah,
and work as a team and get to know each other and stuff. So we used that project as a learning experience, put it out there for free for people to play for
yeah,
a while, and then eventually took it down. And it was so fascinating to work on something like that and be able to take those skills to where we are now. It's
yeah.
crazy.
I think the general sentiment I feel like when it comes to at least working with video games is that like just kind of getting out there and doing something is important, and then that through connections is often how you end up actually being able to do your full on project. But it takes years of just like, I don't know, I like Jurassic Park, I'm gonna make Jurassic Park things, and where that leads you kind of thing. Because I imagine it probably wasn't something that you were thinking about like, this is my way I'm gonna get into game development. I could be wrong,
No,
but
it was just,
yeah.
I don't know. It's just weird. Like, so I've kind of had an interesting experience with this
Mhm.
because, like, I feel like game development in a way runs in my family. So like my brother, for example, he worked on Minecraft mods when he was a teenager.
Oh,
He
okay.
did this for ages, and he actually made one of the bigger Minecraft mods called the Aether.
Mhm.
So he worked on that, and that like got really big in the community. And then right around the time I finished this like Jurassic Park project, he actually got hired at Mojang
Oh, yeah.
as a developer. So like right now he's living in Sweden and like working on the game. And from there it's just been so interesting to see like our paths kind of diverge
Yeah.
in a different way. Like I've been able to work on an indie game of my own, and he's been able to join the game development
Yeah.
community over there. And both of it was just literally through our own self-taught experiences.
Yeah, and I think there's an interesting divergence in the sense that like it sounds like, he went into a company, right? He got basically, I don't know,
Mm.
headhunt is the right word, but somebody specifically hired him or whatever. I'm sure he applied or something. Or maybe, I don't know. We don't need to get into your brother, but in your case, you you built your own team, it sounds like, right? Like
Yes.
it sounds like you kind of took the personal responsibility to say this is what I want, and really went out of your way to make your own dev team in that regard. um so
Yeah.
do you
and
feel like
and and
that's
that was
I don't know a question I'm trying to get at, but I'm curious if you have any thoughts on like the different mindsets that you guys went through to go down those two different paths.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's really tough to like start your own company and like have all that responsibility for sure.
Yeah.
Part of, I'm sure you've seen from the game, you have the little credits of Screen West and Screen Australia. Those
Hmm.
were the two government grants that we received to help the game's development as well.
Was that
So
at
part
the
of that.
beginning of the project, or was that like during the project you applied to those?
That was like halfway. Like
Okay.
we started the project in 2020,
Hmm.
and we got our first grant from Screen Australia in 2023, and then the start of 2024 we got our second grant from Screen West.
Gotcha.
So like I totally did not plan to have any funding for the game or anything. Like I was going to finish it regardless of funding, even if it took extra time. But what that just allowed me to do was quit my day job at that time and work on the game full time for a few years and put extra resources into the development, which was really good. And that's where like a lot of extra like contractors and stuff came on as well for things in Australia. So that was really good too.
For the other two core team members, were they a part of that kind of mindset of like, even if we don't get money, we're just going to push through this to get it done? Or is that something that came with the grant?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Like they've been in this from day one. They really have been a part of the development. So
yeah.
Regardless of whether we got funding, luckily we did, but even if we didn't, we were still going to see the game through. Just might not have been like as quick or as grand as we wanted to.
Yeah.
But it's been really amazing, just even the experience of like going through all of that and seeing like how all of that stuff works and running the company and stuff. It's been a lot of stress for sure. It's been a lot of responsibility for myself, but it's been something that I'm really glad I was able to get through.
Yeah, and I will say, like, from the player's perspective, so I play a broad range of games. I don't know how much you know about, like, what I do. I don't know if you're just like, oh, this is the guy who made a Chibi Robo video, or if you know, like, the weird nightmare holes I go down when it comes to video games. I love, like, looking at, like, student games a lot of times. Dojin games kind of fit in that as well, where I've been to, like, Comiket in Japan and bought games there. And a lot of times they're just, like, university students trying out a physics test or something like that. And so there's like this kind of the broad range of games that exist in this like scene of like people who just want to do something that feels like somebody just doing something just to make it work, and then that's good enough. And they don't have the resources or the experience, things like that as well. I will say when I played your game, I was very impressed by just like how complete and professional it felt. Because I didn't really know going into what I was going to see. I think I looked at your game maybe once, like a handful of years ago, in the context of like, oh, this is a Chibi Robo inspired game, right? So I was like really impressed by just like how whole it felt. And maybe this is something that I recently interviewed another set of developers, and a similar thing of just like some random guy I met at Evo was like, hey, I made a video game. And then I played like, oh, this is like an actual video game. I'm so used to playing these little like student games when I meet people that it's kind of interesting to like talk to people who make like full, I don't want to call it a product, full piece of art, like seeing it through to fruition of what feels like the most complete version of what something can be. If that makes sense. So
yeah,
that was the feeling I got.
I'm glad it feels like that. Yeah. I'm very glad it feels like that because it's it's very hard to especially know when to like finish. Obviously, if budgets run out and stuff, then that's kind of what happens. But we've been working on this game for over 5 years now, and I feel like I've polished it to death, and I've just like done as much as I can to really make it feel like a worthwhile experience and something. Like the cinematic cutscenes, they're all pre-rendered, and that was something that took like months and months. Like I think I spent like a solid 6 months just working on those alone. So trying to make it feel like maybe some parts of it that you wouldn't necessarily expect from a team our size, to feel really polished and something that surprises people. I think that was really fun to do.
Yeah. I am a little curious because we talked about you getting into game development through Jurassic Park, and obviously nobody is just one interest, right? How did you end up on wanting to kind of create something? And maybe the other question I should ask is like how you feel about this comparison, but in the vein of Chibi Robo. Like to me, from the outside, it seems very directly like this is kind of a spiritual successor to this, or at least it feels like you are specifically looking to communicate to the audience. There's a set of values here that we're trying to bring into this game. How did you end up on that track of wanting to create an experience like that? And like, is that something that is, that feels like an accurate description of like what you're trying to do, bringing in the Chibi Robo franchise, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up playing like so many different type of games. I think a lot of games that you can kind of see come through like Pikmin, like Mario Sunshine and those types of experiences. But Chibi Robo was actually, it was really interesting because I didn't fully get to experience the game itself until my adulthood. Like I much like many other people, didn't know it exists when it released. Nintendo didn't do a great job at marketing it, so
I was there
you
launch
know, I
day,
wasn't.
baby.
Oh, there you go.
My
Good
mom
job.
made fun of me. She was like, well, "Why don't you just clean the actual house?" I'm like, "No."
I mean,
wanna be
I
the
wish I
tiny
was there
robot.
launch day.
So
And you know, like a lot of the games that I really like in the franchise never even came out in English. They were
yeah,
Japanese exclusive. Like my favorite one is the Clean Sweep game on the DS.
I haven't played that
Um,
one still. I probably should.
it's so
but
good.
I think
It's like
Captain
a true
Rainbow
successor.
is more of my range now, but yeah.
That's a great game too.
Yeah.
But yeah, like as far as our game, like we definitely went in with the mindset of like I want to bring some of that spirit back. Because obviously at the time we started development, the company for Chibi Robo, they actually like totally shut down.
Yeah.
And so like, you know, it'd been years since we saw a good Chibi Robo game. Ziplash was the last one in the series. And I just really wanted to like sort of tap into something that I feel like deserves to still be around.
Yeah.
And indie developers, we kind of get that freedom and that choice of making something, even if it's niche, even if it's something that other people might not necessarily like.
Yeah.
We get to kind of revive that. So I definitely didn't want to go into it like, you know, let's rip off Chibi Robo or let's copy it to a T. But just bring some of that spirit back. And I've always loved that sort of perspective of being like a tiny character in a big world. I kind of got like a lot of that inspiration from playing Pikmin growing up, and Chibi Robo did that really well. But one of the main things that I feel like that game did so well for me was just the way it subverted the player's expectations. You know, you're going into it with an expectation, oh, it's a cute little game about cleaning as a robot. And then suddenly there's divorce. Suddenly there's aliens. Suddenly, you know, all this stuff is happening around. And like as funny as the dialogue is, there's these undertones there that are very serious. And it's just, you come away from the game so surprised with the journey it took you on. And that's the kind of experience I really wanted to tap into. So yeah.
It is really, when you look at the story, like basically mending like a broken family, basically, right? Or maybe broke is not the right word, but one that is falling apart to some extent, right? And they're like very normal everyday issues to have to deal with, right? I feel like if you think about like a divorcing family, it's the pretty standard stuff. At least as somebody who, my parents divorced when I was a kid, and then I had to go to like divorce therapy classes, and I was not emotionally mature enough for that at all. But, you know, I was there listening to other kids, and like everybody has like their own different stories, but a lot of them align with like what Chibi Robo I feel like touches on overall with that stuff. So, one thing I wasn't expecting is I kind of coming in was expecting something that would be a little bit more faithful to what Chibi Robo was. But instead I got a game that I feel like is very, I would say takes what was important about Chibi Robo and kind of applies it to a different genre. Because I think, I'd say the way I would classify Misc is like a 3D, is Misc the right way to say it?
Yes,
It's okay.
That's correct.
Is I would classify it as like a 3D platformer, right? Closer to like
Right.
maybe Banjo-Kazooie or a Mario game. A 3D Mario is probably my greater point of comparison in that regard. So I'm kind of curious, when you're adopting the Chibi Robo franchise, essentially, even though it's not technically Chibi Robo, what did you feel like were the limits of what you could do in terms of making your game? Was there anything that you felt like was just a step too far for the franchise in any way, or is it just more about, you know, your own personal feelings of what Chibi Robo meant?
I mean, it was kind of like a mix of both, I guess, in a way. Like you mentioned, like how it's definitely more of like a 3D platformer with Misc, and that was something that, you know, I've been a fan of 3D platformers since I was a kid. I absolutely love that type of genre. So I definitely wanted to create a game that was in that genre, but one of the things with Chibi Robo is like it's so fascinating exploring that world as a little robot, but I guess by the game's design, you're very limited by that as well. You know, things do feel at times very methodical, slow. You know, you're literally like pulling out a drawer and then slowly climbing up and then step by step getting there. So like with Misc, I didn't want that experience to slow down the player.
Yeah.
So like Buddy, he's very agile. You can do leaps, you can hover across things, you can go really, really fast. So I kind of wanted to combine like, that world of and see, what would Chibi Robo kind of be if it was more of a platformer as well.
Yeah.
So that was interesting to play with that dynamic and see how that fit.
And I definitely felt that when playing it, because I think I haven't sent you my review for it. I did record a review. I don't know if it's going to 100% be the final review or not. But I did mention in there that the idea that like what you get out of your game is kind of the appeal of a tiny world without the burden of it. Where I feel like Chibi Robo, and in some ways there's an appeal to this. I'm not saying Chibi Robo is wrong for this. It is very hard to climb that world because everything's kind of like more of a puzzle in some ways of how to get somewhere rather than how Chibi Robo will physically overcome to get somewhere. Like he can do a little bit of acrobatics, but very minor, whereas your character can move around the world in a super flexible way. And like, even like fences and things like that, you often can just like jump over them or get on things. And like, it has a very almost like Xenoblade Chronicles X feel of like, there's some places you can just kind of like hook onto little ledges and find fun ways to get up places. And I think it doesn't take away from the scale of that world though, in the way that you've designed it, which I think is interesting.
Right.
So I'd be curious.
And obviously we don't have the battery limit as well. And like that was such a fun mechanic in Chibi Robo, but like obviously for our game, we don't want to focus on slowing down the player. The most you slow down is to pick up a piece of trash, so it was really interesting, kind of looking at Chibi Robo and other games like it and seeing what are the best aspects that would feel right for our game. And a lot of it just came through toying around with things and playing with them and seeing what worked over time. For a very long time during development, we didn't have a run button or a sprint button at all.
Yeah.
That was definitely added later on because even though you are quite agile, I could just kept feeling like you're not fast enough, especially for speedrunners.
I often felt like I didn't need the dash most of the time. You move fast as is, but it's a nice thing to have there, right? So I appreciate it. I would be curious to know when it comes to like the character movement, like how do you prevent that from getting too out of control to the point that it kind of like undermines your game design? Because Buddy does feel very flexible. He feels very capable. But at the same time, you still want to like present this like big world. So like how do you prevent the player from getting like too much of an advantage in that regard, if that makes sense?
Lots of testing, just so much testing. Like the length of Buddy's jumps changed so much during development, and like that was the hardest thing because as soon as we tweak anything, we have to like redo the distance of different jumps.
Yeah.
The underground challenges with the gust challenges, they changed so much during development as well. And those type of areas were like the one sort of bit of the game where we could try to challenge the player in that aspect and kind of really focus on the platforming specifically. But I also, the game is definitely not, I wouldn't say it's hard. Like we really try to make it as easy as possible for everyone to get through it. Yeah. So I wanted to be able to have the character be flexible enough so then it is easy for kids to play it. It is easy to kind of, judge your jumps a bit easier with the hovering and give you more time to kind of get used to the world, because not everyone is even still used to 3D platformers and just controlling like a camera and stuff. So I really had to think about that stuff as like, if this is someone's first 3D game, what would that be like?
Yeah, I think the way that I kind of felt playing it as somebody who had played Super Mario Sunshine is it kind of feels like you constantly have the flood enabled, where it basically, if you haven't played Sunshine, the flood's like the water jetpack and it lets you kind of hover around a little bit. But there's a limited resource in that regard in Sunshine where you need water to do that. So it's like that's what it reminded me of. And I assume that was maybe a part of it. I would actually be kind of curious what your thoughts are. Like when I talk about these things to you and I'm like referencing Chibi Robo and Super Mario Sunshine, like, is that something that resonates with how you talk or how you think about Buddy? Or do these feel like independent decisions you just made and like the comparison feels a little like moot, if that makes sense?
I think it's like whether I'm conscious or not, there's going to be that comparison in my head as well, because I grew up playing these games. Like, I
Yeah.
absolutely love Mario Sunshine. Like, there's so many things like that where I instantly think of like, oh, this worked in that game because of this reason. And
Yeah.
like Mario Sunshine, for example, my favorite moveset is the dive. And that's absolutely in Misc,
Yeah.
like you can do that same dive, and that is such a powerful, fun thing to do. And so like I never get offended by getting compared to anything Nintendo. That's honestly like a good thing to me, because like I'm such a big fan of it. But obviously going into the game, it really is a combination of all of the things we grew up with.
Yeah.
And I feel like hopefully we balance it in a way where it doesn't just feel like it's particularly derivative of one thing, but it's actually kind of blended together and made its own thing as well.
If you had to think about one thing about like how the game controls and how you interact with Buddy, is there anything in particular that you feel like stands out, where like you feel like this is the most like me in this video game, of like something I developed on my own, if that makes sense? Obviously everybody's inspired by everything, that's just how humans work, so I'm not saying it needs to be, but like what feels like most your thing in this video game from your perspective?
I mean, as far as just talking about the characters like moveset, for example, I think Buddy has such a unique jump ability. So like obviously he's got his double jump, but the distance that you can actually jump if you time things right and space out your jumps and hold down the hover button, it's like actually quite substantial. You can
Yeah.
get across a big distance, and that was something that really kind of we landed on by accident, and I just really liked how that felt and how you could really take advantage of that. And it kind of took some player patience as well. Like you can't I saw so many people instantly pressing double jump, and it's like that's you're just canceling out all your momentum. So by kind of waiting for it and like using your first jump and then using your second jump after a time, it's just such a unique feeling.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like it's floaty but in a good way. And it's just I feel like that kind of move set is very specific to our game, and I'm really proud of how we manage that and manage the way that you can get around the world and the puzzles through that.
Yeah, and I feel like the Gust challenges, which for people listening, if you don't know, is like the kind of like Super Mario Sunshine. Sorry, do another comparison. Little challenge rooms you go in where you can basically do a bunch of platforming stuff. Feels like it's saying, hey, this is an optional thing, but if you want to do this, you need to interact with this kind of specific mechanic that is important to this game. And I feel like that is a good way of like kind of teaching people to utilize it. Maybe, I guess. I guess the question at that point is like, do you force people to do it or not? And I feel like in your game's case, it is very optional if you want to directly interact with that, because you give lots of like, you don't need to do everything in each area to move on. Like you can do a set number of things and then move on from there, and it's kind of up to you if you want to fully explore these areas, right? So
Yeah, like we designed the game from day one to be as like optional as possible. Like
yeah.
I know going into it, like I'm really really proud that the reviewers who have played the game so far, they've all come back and said 100% of the game. Like that is the best news in the world, because I really wanted to feel satisfying to 100%. But if you can't find something or you don't want to do a particular challenge, you don't have to. There's no pressure there. I wanted it to be very accessible in that way. So, there's definitely different ways to approach each level, and I think that's just kind of the design that we've gone with.
I think one thing that I was thinking about afterwards, and I don't think I included this in my review when I was talking about it because I hadn't thought about it until then. I was talking to my friend about 100% in games and how miserable most people seem to feel when they 100% games. And I think with your game, it does feel like it is, hey, if you want to go and just kind of experience these last handful of things you missed, you can kind of go back at, after you finish the journey and everything, you learned all your skill set, and go apply that to an earlier level and just kind of look for this thing to 100% it. The one thing I will say, if you want like some feedback in that regard, was like the trash system, which you do put the thing in place, but like it does feel a little hard to find trash at times. I'm just like, I don't know where this could be. And I'll walk across the area like 4 times. Like, where the heck is this little piece of trash? And then you have the cheat system where you can basically go and like say, I'm not going to get any points for this, but I just want to go see it. So you give people the player ability to do that. And I did do that a few times, but I definitely was just like, I kind of wish there's just like a little bit more visible, of just like a little bit easier to catch my eye almost. So
Yeah, I mean, we put in that like sort of cheat system very last minute because
yeah.
like that was our main complaint with like testing, is like some people, especially in the bigger levels, they would like literally not find the last piece, and it was just this tiny little like crumb
Yeah.
that they had to go find. So I definitely wanted, you know, it to be something that people, even if they had to use that system, could go through and still find the piece. Because I definitely don't want the collecting aspect of that to feel tedious or annoying. But you know, for players who do like a challenge, it is kind of fun to be able to go around and explore everything, and it's a good excuse as well to just explore the environment
Yeah.
more. You know, like there's so many parts of it that there's trash hidden away in different areas, and I think that was kind of fun hiding that and organizing that.
I will say one thing though, criticizing myself, is I went back and looked, and there's like it was like the snow level. There's like little oil things, and they are colored in a way that they're very visible. And I went back and watched my footage of me playing it. I ran by it like 8 times, never cleaning it. So it's like very visible right there, but like my brain just for some reason was just like, no, I love oil. That's not trash. So
it was hard to like even design the sort of trash stuff, because I was like, you know, how does it stand out and not blend out into the environment?
Yeah.
So like, you know, we tried to have like different effects that like kind of shine now and then, or sparkle and that type of stuff. And then obviously like every single area has unique trash models as well. Like we actually designed it kind of based around the area you're in. Like the snow level, there's lots of Christmas ornaments that are just trash to these robots. They don't understand what Christmas is. So, you know, you got like Christmas wrapping, you've got baubles and all this type of stuff. So it was really fun to like design that and kind of make, I guess, that mechanic feel different in each chapter as well.
Yeah, I'm a little curious about like thematically going through the game. You know, this is the robots are very tiny. They're not moving very far. So it's kind of fun to see the ways of like, this is a desert area. It's probably like a sand play place kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
Or here's the snow area. And then, you know, the AC was left on too long kind of thing, right? I'm curious, like when you were building out these levels, like how were you thinking you wanted to like introduce variety? Like what was the process for figuring out, you know, how to make each of these levels stand out?
I mean, the number one the number one thing that we did was actually just start each level with a core like central idea. So for example, chapter 4, that's the sort of snowy area. I kind of had to think, you know, how is this snowy? Especially the rest of the game, it's like literally summertime. You know, it's not winter at all. And you know, this world is post-human, but the biomes aren't that crazy. So one of the things is like, you know, I had that idea of like an old broken down fridge that's like sort of, you know, kept running and it's overpowered, so it's creating all this cold area. So that was the first thing I modeled, was just this giant fridge that you could actually explore the inside of. You could jump on it and go on the outside. Different areas like chapter 2, there's the 2 trees that you kind of like make your way up through the mushrooms. There's always that core sort of area and model that I start with, and especially like something big that I feel like will be an interesting thing to explore as a tiny robot. So each of them kind of has that, you know, like chapter 5 has the giant instruments that you're like running across and, you know, clashing on and stuff. So that was really fun to like kind of approach that. And as far as variety, I just kind of, you know, obviously different games, you always have like the winter level, you've got the lava level and all that stuff. We don't have lava, but, you know, like just trying to approach it that way, and then have that spin of, you know, like a desert level, you know, that is just a kid's playground. So to kind of have that unique perspective of these robots don't really know what is typical in our world, so they kind of view something totally different. And that's like one of the reasons separately is why all of the objects you collect for these characters is not named something normal, like, you know, like a bouncy ball is a buoyant orb or something like that. Very, very similar to like how Pikmin kind of names all of their objects as well.
I haven't played Pikmin in a long time. Is that a similar thing where it's just like a
Yeah, everything has got its like all unique way. Like a lemon is like a zesty something. It's like it's all fun.
I am a little curious because you said you started with like a central object, it sounds like. Um, and then did you just like build the level around that basically from there? Like how did, because in my brain, and I don't know if this is like my brain just like making something up as it went through this, but it did feel like the game was kind of developed in like, or designed in like quadrants. It felt like kind of each corner of the map had its own specific set of purposes. And it felt like that design was a little independent in each section, but I think that's like what helped make each area interesting, was that it felt like each of these felt like their own miniature playgrounds within a larger playground, if that makes sense.
I mean, we definitely like we would have that central idea and kind of, like you said, build our ideas around it. But the game's development was so interesting because, like, I mean, I feel like nearly any game is not done in a linear fashion.
Yeah.
Like there were so many chapters that we did towards the end of development. Like one of the last chapters we actually worked on was actually like chapter 5. Like out of all of, you know, all 9 chapters, like you wouldn't have thought the 5th one would be the last one. And then of course, like some chapters we actually worked on for years earlier. So like we worked on the end of the game first and then built the rest of the game around it. So there was a lot of stuff that we had to do out of order. And like part of that is just like we would create a mechanic in one area and then be able to go to a different area and kind of flesh that out there and how it's going to be used there. So like it was kind of a mix match of everything, and sort of, you know, iterating and then revisiting. And yeah, it was just a really interesting process.
I feel like, I don't know where I've heard this before, but I feel like I've heard before that it is easier to design harder levels than it is easier levels during a development process. I don't know how true
it definitely
that
can
is.
be.
Yeah. So
I mean, our game isn't too hard.
First. Yeah.
One of the reasons we worked on the later stuff first was actually just for story reasons. Like we wanted to get the ending right. That was really important to us for a narrative perspective. And based off of what happens at the later parts of the game, we wanted to get the earlier parts fitting that and kind of working all together. Yeah. So that was interesting. Like, you know, especially like with TV shows and stuff you see these days, you know, I hate watching a show and then it just gets cancelled, or like they rush the ending. So like I definitely didn't want to do that. Yeah. And you know, like obviously you're gonna have the complete game anyway, but for development, as we had the limited time, we really wanted to get that ending feeling very satisfying and right, and give the rest of the game earlier the justice it needed. So that was really interesting to kind of approach it in a backwards way like that.
Yeah. I know you don't have like a ton of development experience probably outside of, is it 2 projects, this one and the Jurassic? Is that, or have you worked on other stuff in between?
I've dabbled in some stuff in between, but
are there games that you've worked on designed that way, or is this like kind of the first time you tried that?
It's definitely the first time I've like really committed to that, because I think that was just something that was really needed for this particular story. But for other projects, it really just kind of developed in a organic way. Like I would start something and then, you know, just over time it would keep growing from there. This one I had a lot more structure and a lot more planning going into it. Like I knew so many things just even as a concept, and that all kind of made it in. Well, as last time with other projects, it was very much more kind of like just create stuff as you go. So it was really interesting kind of approaching it like that.
One of the things that I think is key to each of these levels is that you have kind of like, each of these levels are populated by characters, right? And I guess in some ways they're kind of quest characters specifically. Like every character has kind of an association related to how you can kind of solve their problem. when you're making those characters, is that something that would come before you design the levels, or is this something that would kind of come afterwards as you're trying to figure out where these characters fit and what would be the appropriate place for them to be in, kind of thing?
I think it came sort of like, I guess, both times as well. Like there were a lot of characters that came in later because of the way that the sort of level was designed. Like obviously with like the winter level, for example, I really wanted to focus on characters around sort of like a kitchen theme and around different tools and stuff like that. But then I really, especially for our game, like one of the core themes is just like, you know, being different. And I really wanted each character to feel unique. Like some characters I wanted to feel totally like you wouldn't expect in that type of area. So the main thing when designing characters in a similar way was just really focusing on one miscellaneous item that they're built from. So, you know, whether that's like a stapler, a gravy boat, a flashlight, like there's all these different things that like these characters are built around. And then part of that could inspire their personality or their quest. Part of that could just be completely different from it as well. So, you know, it was just kind of like, I guess, a dynamic process of like looking at what's needed for the level, but also looking at what could be interesting to explore as a mechanic of something you have to do to help them, or a particular item that they could try to find for this character. So yeah, it was really interesting.
You mentioned like the object, was that kind of like the and I'm sure it varied per character, but was that usually like the starting point was like what kind of object that we want in the world first and foremost? Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, like I really wanted each character to have something identifiable as like what they're built of. Some of them are like quite hidden as well. Like one of the characters in chapter 3 is like Sheriff Cutter. His body is actually like a bullet upside down, and so like there's all these like different things that like, you know, we've done in a particular way that maybe are even a little bit hidden, but that's kind of what their core character is built from.
Yeah, I think like design wise, like aesthetically, there were some characters that I wasn't 100% sure what they were, but like after you see them from enough angles as they kind of move around, you're like, oh, okay, like that's kind of the core design. But I think the thing is that they didn't feel. I think I view that as like a positive because they didn't feel like those objects per se. They feel like inspired by those objects, if that makes sense. Like they feel more like creatures first, if that makes sense, right? Yeah. Maybe creatures is a weird way to put that, but I think the point I'm trying to make is like I feel like there's like a sense of liveliness in every single one of them. That I would, as somebody who has not made a video game like this ever, I would like on paper I would think it'd be hard to make sure that you taking an inanimate object feels alive would be a challenge. I feel like that'd be a hard thing to do. So
it was definitely tough for me because like I animated all the characters in the game, and you know, I before this I actually never animated a character at all. This was my first game doing characters in any like category, and which is ironic because there's over 75 characters in the game, and you know, obviously we've got like dialogue and a story, and that's also something that I've never worked on before as well. So this is like my first attempt with everything. But you know, like for the characters, it was so fun to bring them alive and give them their own personalities and backstories. And it was really tricky to like, you know, there's so many intricacies for animating them, and you know, a lot of them don't have mouths or eyes or anything like that. So it's like, how do you make that feel like it's talking? How do you make that feel like it's actually interacting with something? But that was kind of part of the fun and part of the limitations we had to make it more believable as well.
Is that, in terms of the solution for that, is it usually like trying to find other limbs on their body to move more, or like what would you say is like a good philosophy to go into when you're trying to do something like that?
Yeah, I guess it was like, you know, there's definitely some limbs that they would like move around, or like they would just kind of like rotate their head or something. But you know, part of the design, one of the reasons we actually chose robots in the first place is because I never worked on characters or animations for characters before. So I kind of took the best thing that I was good at that time, which was like it's called like environment modeling. So like, you know, hard objects like miscellaneous objects, like everyday stuff. I wasn't good at organic stuff that you kind of have to sculpt like humans and creatures. So I actually chose the sort of miscellaneous robot design based off those limitations. It's much easier to animate a character that has floating limbs rather than something that's joined together. So that's why, like, Buddy, for example, he's kind of got like the me hands and they're like floating in the air. He doesn't have a mouth, so there's nothing to animate there. Bag Boy's literally just a bag that has no expression. So all of them like were specifically designed in a way that like was obviously fun to look at and interesting to explore, but also were designed around our limitations as developers as well. And then through that, obviously, over time, I got much better at animating and was able to work on some more complex characters. Like in the snow level, there's like this two-headed, like sort of dragon-looking character, and that was like one of the more complex ones to actually rig and animate because they got like this very bendy neck and stuff like that. So it was just so fun to really take that idea of like, we're limited by this, but like we can actually make this our advantage to do something unique and good.
Yeah, I think that's the thing people always say is like kind of use your limitations to your advantage in a lot of ways. Of like, if you can't do something, find the way to make the thing you can do make sense, or if anything, make it like a selling point in some ways. I think one thing that I noticed, and maybe this kind of comes into the characters not being very organic feeling, is that like your game has a very like rustic look. If that makes sense. Hopefully I'm using that word right, rustic. But everything is this very worn feel, and in some ways the characters almost feel like a part of the environment themselves. Like they feel very present in how they feel like they've been weathered in the same rate that the environment's been weathered, if that makes sense.
Right. Yeah.
Like
so I kind of wanted them
look.
I kind of wanted them to feel like they were just put together with, in this post-human world where like everything's kind of gone. There's all these objects that have been laying there for multiple years and rusting away. Like I wanted them to kind of feel like a part of that environment's come to life into this character. And that was really fun to put together. That was something that was it's very easy to kind of put that style together for me. It's much easier to make something look worn down and lived in than it is to like actually make it look kind of new and pristine. So that was definitely the intent and part of that.
Yeah. I think it's like really nice in the consistency. I was a little split when I was reviewing it of like how to talk about it, because in some ways I think I would have liked more color to kind of differentiate the environments a little bit more. But at the same time, I feel like you have such a very distinct look to your game and how it's presented, and it feels very whole and complete. So it's like, it feels like one of those things, like I don't feel like I can really criticize it as much as it is like I tend to just like more colorful things, right? And so like it was a weird thing. I wasn't sure how to communicate that without coming off. It's just like, this is not a thing that I would have preferred it this way, therefore it's bad, which I don't think is true. And I think you being an
Right.
environment artist makes a lot of sense of like how it came out that way as well. But I think that is like what makes this game stand out visually, right? Like this is a very specific style you chose. And I feel like, again, it kind of works with everything you've done. And I think I very much appreciate the consistency of that style throughout. And I don't know if I really know what exactly what was looking for before, other than maybe some things. Maybe I would like want some things to stand out a little bit more at times.
Right.
Maybe kind of going back to the trash thing, but like sometimes it feels like things get kind of lost because it all does look very similar. But again, like I said, I feel like the way it's good in its consistency. So it might just be a trade-off thing of you make a choice, right? Like, and there's no real good option. I'm sure, like, the thing I'm sure is, like, all the limitations that come with this stuff, and you're making the video game. It's like, at some point, the video game is the video game. But yeah, it's just, those are, like, the thoughts that I had that I was struggling to figure out, like, how to word it in a way. Because I don't want it to sound bad.
Right.
Because I don't think it's a bad thing. But it does feel like, I feel like there's something in me that, like, wants something a little bit more there. So... But
interesting. Yeah. I'll keep that in mind.
Like, my fear was in saying there's not enough color is that I'm thinking about Chibi Robo, and I don't want that to be the comparison point, right? I think one of my like originally when you reached out to me to talk about this on the podcast, I was thinking this game's be a lot more Chibi Robo like. So I thought the conversation I was going to have with you is a lot more about how do you create your own experience in the light of this other thing. Then I played your video game. I was like, oh, you just made something that's very. You did exactly what I was asking. What was like, I thought the game would struggle with, which is no, you overcame all that. I still think this is a very distinct game on its own, right? That's how I feel. And so it's like weird for me to say color because I feel like that's not what you're valuing here when you make your game. So anyways, you got to hear a little bit of my brain process of how do I criticize.
No,
that's a big part of why I actually don't know if I want to say like publish the review as is, because there's a couple things in there that I look at and I say, I don't know if this is true. And that's the thing that bothers me.
But first reactions are important, and like gut feelings definitely matter as well. And it is interesting because like I feel like I always kind of like struggle with that line of I want to make a game. Obviously, our game is quite cartoonish and colorful in a certain way, but I also wanted it to be old and rustic and worn down to fit that world it's in. So. It is hard to sort of find that right balance. Like literally the last few weeks we've like put through a patch, which I feel like by the time you finish the game it might not have been even put in, but we like boosted the saturation.
Oh, really?
The whole
okay.
Game.
Maybe I should go back and take a look at it. Yeah.
Yeah. So it because it is tough, and like another thing is like just the simple fact that like my monitor that I work on, might be more saturated than other people's, and so like I've really had to look at stuff like that, especially at this time where I'm seeing it on so many different screens. One of the reasons we boosted the saturation across the game was playing it on each of the Switch devices that we have. We have the original Switch, then we have the Switch Lite, the OLED, and then I recently got to sit down and test it on the Switch 2. And all of them, their screens are totally different. Yeah. Like the original Switch looks terrible. Like the screen is so dull and so washed out. And so like I didn't want it to feel sort of separate from other games that you would play on there. Like, Nintendo games are so vivid and so beautiful. Yeah. But then like on some screens like the OLED, it looked a lot better. But I feel like it could have just used that little bit more punchiness. So like that was one of the reasons I kind of did that, and I feel like hopefully maybe that issue will be like kind of addressed now. So
I also feel like the OLED's probably I don't know the distribution of Switches out there, but I imagine there's probably a smaller sliver of the market than original Switches out there, right? So kind of designing more for the baseline versus the rare case. I don't know how much on the development side you can do. Like, is this an OLED? Maybe don't turn the saturation of as much or something like that. But
we can't do anything specific to devices, sadly. But yeah, like, and obviously, like once you plug it into your TV or you dock the game or play it on Steam or whatever, it's going to look completely different as well. So it is a really tough thing. And obviously it depends on your screen. But overall, like we tried to make the game both feel colorful and cartoonish, but also feel like you're in this world that is worn down. Because like I don't know how much you played Pikmin, but like Pikmin 4, for example, one of the biggest like I guess design or environment issues I had with the game is like one of these levels you're entering a house. It's literally like a full house, and it just doesn't make sense in this world that's supposed to be like no humans in it. You see a lot of things that in previous games are very like worn down and rustic. And then that you just have like this IKEA display house that's perfect. And like, there's not a sense of mold or withering or history in it at all. So like, that's one of the things that I really wanted to focus on is like, make this world feel lived in, make it feel like it has history. And part of that is, like sun damage and desaturation and stuff like that. So
this is more of a general question, but when you think of Nintendo games, do you think of games that have done that well? Because I often think of Nintendo as a company who does not care about world consistency, if that makes sense. I feel like they just kind of do what feels right, and then well, whatever. That's what my
Well,
general sentiment with them.
I feel like Nintendo has like unabashedly been a mechanic first company. You know,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
they think of an idea, they find a franchise that fits that idea, and then they design the game around that. And
Yeah.
like that you know that goes to their strength, but then sometimes it does go to their weakness where there is inconsistency. Like we got a new Donkey Kong game coming out, and suddenly Pauline's 14, and you know, like it
Yeah, yeah.
doesn't really make sense. But you know, when you play the game, it doesn't necessarily have to, and especially in these worlds where there might not be much story or lore or anything, like they're more of a bonus thing
Yeah.
for fans. So but you know, that was something that was important to us, and we wanted to get right and feel consistent. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's a really interesting thing, and it's interesting to hear from someone who's played the game and kind of hearing that perspective, because obviously like I've kind of worked on this in a bubble, so like
Yeah.
my ideas that I hope translate well might not, and some ideas that I do hope translate well might really show through. So
I mean, that's communication in general. I mean, video games might not be viewed as some as like a way to communicate. And maybe as somebody who majored in communications and stuff, like this is me just like over applying my worldview. I feel like everything is just a way people communicate in some ways, but I think video games is a way to do that as well. And I think some of that comes down to little gameplay design language and things like that. So narratively, like, so correct me if I'm wrong. You think you said earlier that this was the first time you've really done a narrative. Is that accurate?
yeah, like I mean, I think the last time I wrote a story was like when I was in primary school. Like I don't read books, I don't like write much at all, so this was really interesting. Like I had to obviously do my research and just naturally find my way through it over time.
When you were tasked with that, when you're looking at this, that I assume you just thought at some point this game needs a story, and I can't necessarily hire somebody to do this story. Or was it I want to do this story? Like, was it a matter of fact of game development, or is it something that you looked at and you said, this is a challenge I want to overcome?
It was definitely like I wanted a story to be able to share with the world. You know, like this was something that like I feel like without the story, the game probably wouldn't exist at all. Like the reason I made the game was because I started with the idea from the story. So yeah, like I literally, one of the first things in the game that like I put together was literally just sketching out key moments in the story and then working backwards of how do we get to that point, and then, you know, where do we go from there.
In thinking about that, because this game's kind of like I think it's 8 chapters. Was that like, when you think about key moments, were you writing them in like that kind, or drawing them in that kind of way, or did the chapters come later, kind of thing, of just like, this is the game and we need to like build it around these chapters? Or
I guess it was like,
yeah, go ahead.
it was kind of both. Like we had definitely like defining key moments that we knew were going to happen in the game. We knew roughly when they would kind of happen, like towards later in the game or earlier or stuff like that. But a lot of it shifted around, and a lot of it was like, especially the chapters. Originally, we had 10 chapters planned for the game. In the final version, it's like 8 and sort of 9. Like 9 is sort of like this little bonus chapter. So you know, that was something that, you know, scope wise we just reduced, and I felt like story wise it was also something to make sure that the game didn't feel like it overstayed its welcome as well. But you know, that was something that really was sort of dynamic, but also something we planned for early on as well.
Did those moments, you said you sketched them out, right? You kind of drew.
Yeah.
Were there particular feelings and themes that each of those sketches had, or is that like, was sketching it like a part of the process of finding those feelings and themes?
Definitely, like we had specific like feelings and emotions in there. Like
Yeah.
all the sketches that I'm referencing are actually unlocks in the game in the gallery. And so that was so fun, because like some of those sketches are before the game's development in 2020. So that was like probably around 2019 or 2018. And like this is just like, that was the fun thing, is like making this world and building these characters. A lot of them were just from some really like interesting ideas early on. Like one of the my favorite things is like one of the characters that's important in the later parts of the game. I won't spoil it, but they were literally created from a picture of a shadow cast
Yeah,
on the
I remember
wall.
seeing that in the docs, and that was like super interesting. It was like, oh, yes, that looks like him.
Yeah. And so like I literally like I took a picture of that, and like I going through the unlock art, I was like, oh, I gotta find that picture, and I found it and I included it in there. So like those are the type of like tidbits from the development and kind of from my mind of coming up with this world.
Yeah.
That what I really wanted to include in there.
I'm curious, did you have to recreate that photo at the time, or is that something you saw and then took a picture in the moment?
I took a picture in the moment,
Yeah.
and then I based that character off of that photo. So
That's really interesting. So I don't know, like, so the thing is, I don't know how much you would like to go into spoilers here and things like that. And I don't think it's that important to talk about very specific story elements usually when it comes to story. I find it's more effective to talk about kind of the themes behind them usually.
mhm.
What do you think were the core themes you were trying to build out in this game?
Well, the number one thing was we built the whole game around the idea of difference.
Yeah.
So like that kind of has like branching topics. So number one was the characters that felt different.
Mhm.
That was definitely like a big part of the story and a big part of the arc that you go on through the game.
Yeah.
And a lot of the characters that you meet kind of have that similar experience as well. But the other part of it was also just the different things that the characters are made up of and the difference that they all have within themselves. We named the game Miscellaneous for two reasons. One, because each character is made of a miscellaneous item, but also two, because some of these characters felt like they weren't fitting in the world. They felt like a miscellaneous part.
Would you say that's true of all the characters or only specific ones?
I think specific ones, but like the other thing is like the final tier of difference in a way is just like making a difference, like being able to help each of these characters, being able to do something to change the world. Each village you come out of, you've changed it in some way, whether it's cleaning, picking up trash, helping a character, or going through and like going on a rebellion against a queen, like all these different things. And so like those three things of difference were really like our core foundation for everything in the game. Especially like mechanic wise as well. Like we really wanted like everything to have a purpose. Like cleaning wasn't there just because we like Chibi Robo. It was there to actually make a visual difference in the area, be part of, the collecting aspect. Like it was basically an extra collectible. And all of it tied together to make a difference, so that's kind of the core theme.
Why is the theme of, I guess, celebrating difference, would that be a good term to use? Why is that
Definitely.
important to you specifically?
I
Or
mean,
your team as a whole?
important.
Yeah.
It's important to me personally because like I much like other developers in my team grew up feeling very different.
Yeah.
And like where it doesn't matter like how that difference is, like I feel like so many people have had that experience. Especially like gamers, even just as gamers, like we're being outcast sometimes by like parents and stuff saying like, oh, what are you doing? And just like I really wanted everybody to be able to come away with a different message from this game. I've had people who have reviewed the game and come back, and each of one has really surprised me by the different things that they've taken away from the story. And I feel like there's so many different ways that you can apply it to your own experiences in your own life. For me, like I said, like I grew up feeling very different. All of our core developers are part of the LGBT community as well. So, like that was very integral to the story in our characters, the story in like, especially Bag Boy as well. It was just really interesting to put that into the game and try to make that both personal, but also relatable to a lot of different people.
I feel like a lot of times in this game, and it could be, maybe this just comes back to like what resonates with you so it stands out, right? Because a lot of times there's a lot of things in a video game, but the things that are going to stand out to you are the things that resonate most with you. I do feel like there's a few characters in this game at the very least where like the way they're different does not seem apparent to themselves, if that makes sense. I don't
Yeah.
know any specific characters top of my head though, so I'm not pulling a good example. But I feel like there was quite a few stories in there that felt like it was overcoming in some ways your own willingness to be different, if that makes sense. Did that
Yeah.
does that resonate at all with something that you designed to be in the game at all, or?
I think it does. Like,
Okay.
I mean, I was really open with the character stories
Yeah.
to even like non-developers. I had so many people's inputs on different type of stories we had to share, because I don't want this to just be a mirror of my experience
Yeah,
or a
yeah.
mirror of our developers. And so like a lot of that, like one of the things we added later in development were these little letters that you unlock through the difference you make.
Yeah.
And so like we got to tell a lot of different stories through that, which was really fun. But one of like the characters in chapter 5, for example, I wrote his story based off of the experience I went developing the game and kind of getting the grants and everything. So this was like one of the musical characters that's like a kalimba character, and they're really kind of like, they feel like almost guilty for being sort of successful in their band. And I felt a lot of that getting like the grants and like, you know, having the opportunity to work on the game full time, because I was kind of like, it was this big thing, and then you know, finally got it, and then it's like
Now you have to deliver almost.
once
Yeah.
and like once that becomes your baseline, and once that's like now your everyday, you kind of feel like, okay, well, I've finally achieved my dream. You know, like my dream personally was working on my own game and being a game developer. And it's like, well, now what? And like, I feel guilty for asking that and like seeing what's next as well.
Yeah.
So like, I really tried to put some of those life experiences into these characters. And I think that was, I hope that comes through in a genuine way as well. And I feel like that's going to be something that hopefully surprises people. You know, like they don't go in expecting to relate to like a talking instrument or something. You know, like I had my friend recently sit down and play, and like she was going through like a hard time with some personal things in her life, and so many characters that I never wrote to really like, that didn't personally resonate with me, really resonated with her. And I feel like that's something that, you know, I'm really proud of, and I'm really excited to see what resonates with people.
I'd be curious to know, because I think like one of the challenges you can end up with in like trying to bring in other perspectives is like how you bring in other perspectives, right? Like who do you reach out to and why? So I'd be curious to know, like, what was that process for you in terms of making sure you're doing your due diligence to that you're properly representing these different problems that people have, and it doesn't come off as like some caricature of what that problem is, if that makes sense, right?
Yeah, I mean, that was really tough, and a lot of that just came with like asking people about their experiences and friends and family and stuff like that. And obviously like also doing just research about similar characters online and trying to get that feeling right. Like you said, it is hard to draw that line between like a caricature, but then also like you don't want these characters to not feel sort of cartoony as well. So like there are sort of stereotypes and caricatures in there, but like hopefully they're done in a respectful way. And so yeah, it was really tough, and there was a lot of times that, you know, constantly throughout the whole game, and even now, like as I'm like adjusting things for launch, there's you know, rewordings and adjustments to the dialogue all the time.
Yeah. I think one of the challenges that you might face in particular in this situation, and I think you've done a really good job of it, of working with it, is like going back to like looking at something like Chibi Robo. Chibi Robo has a lot of time with those characters. They are around for most of the game. Most of the time, you're going to revisit them, come back, and so the development is like very slow and consistent. I don't know if Chibi Robo has a. It's been so long since I played Chibi Robo. I don't remember the themes of that game other than the broken family stuff. But in the case, that doesn't really matter. The case of your game, though, there are these very quick moments that happen where it's like you are going to talk to this character. There's going to be the before dialogue and the after dialogue. I'd be curious to know, like, what was your thought process on how to represent those problems in like such a short period of time, if you view it as a short period of time? Because to me, it seemed like this is going by very quick, but it feels like it's handling it very respectfully and very thoughtfully despite that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that was honestly, like, narrative wise and dialogue wise, that was probably the toughest thing to balance, because like, how do you give context of this character and like their quirks and their history and their problems all in, like, 5 lines or something like that? And it is really tough. Like, I don't want every conversation to feel like, here's my opening dialogue, here's my history, here's my problem, but it has to have some sort of structure that's familiar throughout the game as well. So I think a lot of that was just different, like, experimenting, rewrites over and over. There was a lot of stuff where initially, like, usually my dialogue process is just to go too far and like overwrite the character, and then slowly over time reduce.
Yeah, I was a little scared initially when I was thinking about it, because I was like, I wonder if this dialogue was going to get like very tiresome, because it is a fast moving game, right? And so stopping and talking to people feels a little like disruptive. But I feel like even if I did get that feeling, which I don't feel like I got that feeling, like, it was worth the time every time. Like, reading the dialogue was always worth it, it felt like, in my opinion. So
good. Then we did something right.
I think you found a good balance there. And I think, like, one of the things that makes this kind of interesting, because you are going from world to world to world, these are very, like, quick moments that happen, right? And I think with the idea that, I think you mentioned it earlier, and I assume this was the case, of, like, the act of kindness, right? One little act of kindness changing somebody's life. Like, I think it fits well with that theme of just like, you're gonna pass by somebody, do something nice for them, and leave, and that's like, their life is just better from there, and you won't necessarily see them again. Technically you do, but I guess for the player's experience, you generally don't see them though again, right? It's just, you kind of move on from that moment. So
and that was exactly what we're going through. Like, we're trying to show that there were so many different types of people in the world. And so, like, you see that through all these different characters. I think one of the fun things that kind of makes a lot of players want to talk to these characters, apart from just like completing the game, was also seeing their different personalities, seeing like even just like how they might sound or how they might react or animate, because they're made of something different. They're always kind of in a different situation. Some of these characters are using like the cogs that you collect in a different way. Like, one's cooking a soup. One's got like weight lifts and all this stuff. So like that type of experience is like hopefully something that people will want to explore as they go through. And then by the end, reflecting on all of that put together, you do get that sense of like, wow, I've been on this big journey. I've talked to all these different people, and in some way I've helped them. So like, that was definitely the goal.
This is a game about tiny little robots running around. So one of the conversations, I was talking to a fellow, I don't know if you're familiar with him. He runs he's on the podcast called No More Whoppers, but he's thinking about making his own video game stories. And his name's Alex Frioli. He's going to do a visual novel, I think is what his plan is. One of the last conversations I had with him about this idea, though, is he kind of feels like not telling a story straightforward and outright is kind of like, makes it so a lot of people kind of miss the point of a story sometimes. This is my interpretation. I will say this is not a direct quote from him, so if somebody's listening, don't take this directly. But who knows Alex? Somebody's listening who knows Alex. So I'd be curious to know your thoughts on like, how do you build, like, why insert these kind of messages in a game that is like, does it feel like it's obfuscating the message to you? Do you feel like you're getting to the point of like what I'm trying to ask? I feel like I don't actually have the question lined up for this properly, but I think I'm just trying to get your general thoughts on like, how much do you obfuscate and how much do you bring out, if that makes sense. And if there's a benefit to obfuscating it behind little robots versus like real people, or if it's just a matter of fact that this is the game we made, so this is what we're going to work with.
I mean, I think it's like, obviously, like I said before, like we kind of designed the robot idea around the limitations that we had. So like, I feel like if this game didn't have robots and was like realistic humans, like, I think first of all that would probably be kind of creepy, but it would just be, I feel like part of the message would be lost there
Mm,
because these are just like innocent little characters that you talk to. You're able to kind of relate to them and put
yeah,
your image on them easier. Um, and so, like, you know, through that, we were able to really tell these stories in a unique way. We were able to visually show difference and, you know, uniqueness and all that type of stuff through the way that these characters all look and act and represent. And I feel like, you know, a lot of this game, I kind of, in a way, see it as like, I guess, my inner child, like,
yeah.
visualized. So like there is certainly like that sense of innocence to the game, and I feel like these robots are very innocent. They don't know what the world is. They've kind of made their own little world here as well. And so like I think all of that was integral to the experience and the story, and I'm really glad that it worked out the way it did.
And so you could correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like in some ways what you're saying is that separating it from the more human aspect of it kind of emphasizes those messages to you even more.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it
Okay.
does. Like, I think it becomes much more relatable when it is something that you can kind of envision yourself
Yeah.
in. Um, and yeah, like if this was like a gritty, you know, like a post-apocalyptic human experience, I just feel like a lot of that would be lost, and definitely would be something that maybe people wouldn't even like one of the reasons like I designed the game the way I did is because I want people to go into the game expecting one thing and then being surprised and coming out with something
Yeah.
deeper. And I feel like because you go in with that not expected, then you actually come out with something that impacts you much more.
Yeah. In some ways, I feel like, and this is me thinking in real time, so sorry if this comes out weird. I feel like you're kind of surrendering your worldview doing it this way. Um, because like when you bring in, if you make it people, in some ways it's almost too relatable, and then so it starts
Right.
bringing in other aspects of like your mindset of how things work. That makes sense. Um,
Yeah.
which I do feel like say for example, we're talking to somebody who's like very like anti climate change stuff or like something like that, right? I would think even to some extent the cleaning up message of the game would probably
Right.
like automatically trigger a certain worldview that would start painting their vision of how these things works. Like I think something that I've seen before, I feel like when you put like he, him, she, that all that stuff on like a character, it starts painting people's worldview. And so even if your game is not designed in any way that your gender or anything like that would matter, that person who has a aggressive feeling towards those kind of things
Mm,
starts making decisions about other parts of your game based off that in some ways.
definitely.
So, okay. I think that's interesting to put it that way. So, assuming you're okay with all that, if you agree
Yeah,
with those
no.
general thoughts,
I agree.
I think that is an interesting way to think about it. So that gives me like kind of a counterpoint, because I do think there is a lot of times where you'll play a game and it feels like there's a very clear message, and then you talk to somebody else and they're just like don't see it at all, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it's just like, oh, and I don't know why, and I don't want to blame them. That's the thing. I don't think media literacy is necessarily like a on or off thing for people. I think it is a lot about mindset. So, but okay. All right. I would be curious about like what, in thinking about delivering that message to people, what impact would you like to have on people who play your game?
I think the number one thing is just to understand that, you know, no matter how different you are, that I guess you deserve to be here. Like
Yeah.
that was the main message in the game. And you know that there's so many differences, good and bad in people and in the world, and that we should, you know, be in it to help each other.
Mhm.
And you know, like that's a very, I guess, in a way, generic message, but like it's something that I really hold true. And I feel like I would really struggle to see people go through this game and be like, I disagree with that message.
Yeah.
Like I hope they come out with something positive. I hope that you know, there's something or a character or experience that they relate to, no matter what side of life they're on.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Are there, in thinking about the ways that video games can impact us in that way, or storytelling in general, maybe, like, are there any games that did that for you at all growing up, or like any
That's a good question.
direct experiences where you're like, I played this game and I felt like it changed my worldview on how I view myself or others, if that makes sense.
I don't know if there has been off the top of my head. I feel like, I mean, I've definitely had games that have changed my worldview and like, you know, that type of stuff, but not necessarily in the same way that I'm trying to kind of approach things with our game.
I think more for like a personal, in a way that you might say was like a personal improvement of like your character, if that makes sense. Not necessarily specifically what Misc says, but like one of the examples I think gets brought up sometimes is do you know Nier, the original one?
Yes.
Which like is very much a game. I believe it's been confirmed by the director as like a game about 9/11 essentially, and the aftermath of 9/11, right? And I think that game generally did a lot for me in like understanding perspective, if that makes sense. And some of this like comes into like, I was also doing like a paper at the time about Sherman's March to the Sea during the Civil War. Were you expecting to talk about Sherman's March to the Sea during your podcast about Misc? Which was about how the North and the South represented different battles of the war and newspaper coverage and stuff like that. And I think I was doing that at a very similar time. And so it like kind of integrated in my life in a weird way where I think a lot of what I started doing became about perspective. And I think that is like, when I think about Nier and how that game impacted me, I think that if it wasn't a big part, it at least was a part of that story, right? Of how I became, I think, a different person to some extent. Or maybe a different person, but changed how I looked at things. So that's like, I think my example, if I were to like ask myself that question. So I don't know if you've had anything in your life that feels like that.
I probably do. Nothing comes to the top of my head. But you know, like I think the main thing for games for me, like, I mean, I don't tend to play. It's funny because like obviously our game is quite narrative focused, but I don't tend to play a lot of narrative focused games. Especially obviously playing a lot of Nintendo games, they don't tend to have a lot of narrative in them. But what I do come away with is the emotional impact of just like how the game makes me feel, or the way that like the music makes me feel and stuff. And I feel like the number one thing Nintendo's done really well throughout the years is just making a game feel like a playground. Like you feel like it's just fun to explore, is so like you feel like a kid again, and like that's the type of feeling that I really wanted going into the game initially, and then coming out of it I wanted you to have that kind of emotional, more story focused experience as well. So yeah, I mean, I probably should have something that I've related to
I just think it's
games,
interesting
but
you built a game with this kind of mindset, and I'd be curious to know if there's something that you can relate to that. But yeah, you don't have to bring that up right now. If you think about it afterwards, I'd be curious about hearing if you do think of something later. So it definitely follow.
I mean, like I love like TV shows and movies, especially TV shows more, and like, you know, I really am interested in like the narrative side of that. There's so many incredible written shows, and I feel like my brother said this as well, like games to me, and I guess games to my brother in a way, is just another medium to tell stories for us. And so like, even though me as a gamer, I might experience stuff very different than that, maybe I've been able to kind of express my worldview and like my experiences and stuff through games, because that's just I think that's the best experience, like to do that in, because it's interactive. It's something that, you know, everybody's going to have a different experience coming out of it. And so, yeah, maybe in another life I would be doing something in animation or a TV show or something, you know?
Yeah, I think I said earlier, but like, I think video games are communication in a lot of ways. It's just how you communicate. It's interesting because it almost has like it's like this weirdly fake tactile feel way of communicating. It's strange. I don't know if I've ever really put into words what video games are in terms of communicating to people. Because obviously you can say it tells a story, and that aligns with a lot of things. But like, I think one thing that, speaking of Alex Fraioli again, who talked to me a while ago about like RPGs, he's like, the struggle against the boss in an RPG is as much of a storytelling as the dialogue before, kind of thing.
Definitely.
And that's something that I haven't really put too much personal brain into. I'm sure there's papers out there. Someone in a college somewhere wrote about it, but I personally haven't really thought too much about. So, I'd be curious to know, when you first started this project, um, what what do you think if you could think back to like when you had a game design, did you have a game design document for this game? Did you make it with a game design document in mind?
No.
No. When you
I'm not
first
that
started
organized, to be honest.
manifesting what this game would be, I'd be curious, like, what did you feel when this game was kind of come together? Was it like a sense of excitement? Was it a sense of like being overwhelmed? Or like, what would you think would be the way if you were to describe your feelings if you put yourself back in those shoes again?
I think the number one thing was just curiosity. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I had never made a 3D platformer before or anything like that.
Yeah.
I would say in a lot of ways, even though I've worked on other projects in the past, this is really my first proper game.
Yeah.
It's definitely the first experience that I've really like been able to put together into something that I feel like is a finished product. So going into it, like I never expected to work on this for 5 years. I never
Yeah.
expected to start a business and make it my day job and all that type of stuff. So this is definitely like not planned at all.
Yeah.
But I wanted to put together an idea that I had in my head for a long time. And when I started to work on that and see it come to life, it just felt right and it felt fun to explore. I felt like I was really able to put some of my skills that I've learned over the years to test and improve them and do that type of stuff. So like it definitely wasn't daunting because at that time I didn't have that full commitment to it. I just really wanted to see where I could take this and where I could keep it growing. And then as I started to put things together and announce it to the public and stuff like that, seeing people's interest in it and seeing that there might actually be something here to explore was just even more exciting. So, like it definitely, like once it became a business, once it became something that had a lot of big responsibilities to, that's when like some of the dauntingness definitely came in. Having deadlines, having different things to manage, that definitely kind of shifted the perspective of things a lot more.
Yeah.
But there wasn't a moment that I didn't want to work on the project. Like I've absolutely loved doing it. Seeing this game evolve over the years. Like literally yesterday I was looking at old footage from like the start of development and it's just like it's insane. Like I would never have thought we would get to this point. So
Yeah. I'm kind of curious about the grant thing a little bit. I feel like I'm kind of like throwing a topic in the middle of a section that I wasn't really intending to, but what is the value of your game that the government feels comfortable giving a grant in that regard? What do you think is that mindset? I'd be curious to know.
well, for each grant, like they definitely have like different internal goals, but I think I would say for both Screen Australia and Screen West, the main one is to really support projects that they feel, regardless of how they do commercially, there is a cultural significance to
benefit. Okay.
And so for us, like, obviously they really saw a value in how the game presented. They played, at that time, like we had been developing for 3 years at that point. So we had like a demo to present to them. Obviously I was in a lot of talks with them and got their impressions and stuff. And they just loved the world. They loved the story that we pitched to them. And I feel like they've just supported so many games that I feel like really showed the best of, I mean, I don't want to say I'm the best of Australia, I'm definitely not, but really showed like the best parts of what Australia can do for games. And like, I've been constantly impressed by how much they've supported the community and game developers over here. Like especially for a government, like there's so many different countries that like don't have these types of programs at all.
The reason I'm asking about this is because I was talking to the other guys I was talking to before you were an American team, and they're just like, yeah, in America, you just take on a lot of debt. It's basically what you do. And he's like, in other countries, it's not like that. So
yeah, and like if this was something that was a debt, I wouldn't have gone for it. Like the one thing that made development not stressful is the fact that this was a grant. This was something that we didn't have to pay back.
Yeah.
This was just purely to make the game better, to improve the economy around game development here in Perth. And That was incredible because like it created so many opportunities that literally would not have happened. There were so many people I worked with that got to be part of the game. They're in the credits, the voiceovers in the game and stuff like that. They're all done here in Perth. And especially like for me, like the game started with this 3-person team across the world. I'm in Perth, Western Australia. My music composer's in New York. My other developers in Florida. And that just like working on a game across different regions is such an interesting experience. But then being able to have the opportunity to collaborate with people in person and do all that stuff together was also just a whole new experience as well. So yeah, I'm so thankful for the grants. And I wouldn't say that I wouldn't say that they necessarily made the game possible, because obviously we had been developing the game for 3 years at that point. We were going to finish it regardless. It just probably would have looked a bit different.
Yeah.
And we probably wouldn't have been able to do it maybe as quickly or as good as we could. But the way it's all worked out has just been so incredible. And I'm really honored and thankful that it happened.
What would you say was the hardest part of development, and like what helped you get through that?
It's interesting because like I don't know if it's counted as development, but the hardest part for me through the process was just the business side and the company side of it. Like I never went to university for anything, let alone game development, but like I also definitely didn't go into this thinking about business and taxes and all that type of stuff. That was something that I had to learn through this process while developing the game as well. And like as soon as I made this my full commitment and quit my job, like that's a big responsibility, and that was something that was really tough to adjust to. Like in comparison, the game development itself, easy, no problem at all. And I think that might just be like how I handle things. Like I know other people who have gotten grants and started companies. That's the easy bit. The game development's the hard bit. So as far as the game itself and where like I might have struggled there, like obviously bugs that pop up can be hell sometimes. Like literally like at one point, it wasn't even that long ago, it was like maybe like 2 months ago, we just had like this bug where the game ran perfectly on PC but constantly crashed on the Switch. And like we're a few months out from launch. It's been long enough where we can't use the old version, and I just like am in this position where I have no idea what to do and how to get through it. And so like that type of stuff, and that pops up, it is so hard to go through. It's so mentally draining to go through as well. But thankfully we got through it and we figured it out. And apart from that, like I feel like the creative side of it, the programming, all of that stuff is honestly just fun to do, even if it's challenging. And the best thing is seeing myself go through that and like solve that problem.
Kind of going back to like you committing to doing this as a full-time thing, like where do you think you found the courage to do that?
I guess, I mean, I kind of had the courage within myself just because I had the opportunity and I was not going to not take it. I will acknowledge that, a lot of developers don't get to do this as their job. And that was something I've always wanted to do. So regardless of how it worked out, I always definitely wanted to take it. But my partner's been so supportive through this, and he's been able to like support me and encourage me and all that stuff. So like that definitely helps. And seeing that I have like a supportive family as well, like they really have come to know that game development is actually important and stuff. So especially once my brother moved over to Sweden and they saw what he was doing with his job and stuff, like it's just been so incredible and supportive all around. So I think if I didn't have that type of stuff, it would be a lot more challenging, but I would definitely still take it regardless, and I would definitely still try. But like it was a very low risk thing going into it. Like it was, again, it wasn't a debt, it was a grant. I had the security and planning to be able to leave my job at the time. And then currently, since we're at the end of development, I'm back at that job again in a new role. So I've been very fortunate to have those types of securities and those types of plans. But yeah, it's definitely a big leap and a big change. That's for sure.
I'm somebody who like suffers from decision paralysis a lot of times, so like it's interesting. I wonder if like using the word courage is a little maybe too strong, because at some point I don't want to like make it sound like you that it was like a inhuman thing you did, if that makes sense. Like I think in some ways maybe that like elevates it too much, but I also think it was very important that you did that, so like I don't want to undermine it too. So I don't know if this is like a weird word hang up for me. Sometimes like I'll use a word, I'm like, I don't agree with this word, and I don't know which word I actually want to use in this place, but I don't want it to sound like that it's not something that other people could be able to do, if that makes sense.
Right.
I think what you did was like something very, you're a normal person, right? And so you're able to do it. But it sounds like the support systems were what helped you the most. Having
Definitely.
family support, having, in some ways, personal support from past you, because it sounds like you kind of made sure you'd be good, right? So,
Yeah.
so thank you, past me. Well, I guess you're kind of still in the project, so I was going to ask you like how it felt at the end, but you're kind of still doing it to some extent. Like, has the project kind of wrapped up in a way that feels a little bit more, like, does it feel different right now, or does it still just feel like I'm in the deep depths of development? So...
It kind of feels like both in a way. Like we've finished obviously you've played the full game, we've finished the full experience, and you know, apart from like a few things we're working on here and there to improve it for launch, like we've wrapped up development, and it's such an interesting thing, because like our first review comes out on the Friday, so like in 2 days or 3 days, and I'm just like so eager and also nervous to hear people's thoughts of the game.
Yeah.
And then, you know, next week we get even more reviews coming out, and it's such an interesting time being able to work on this game for so many years in this sort of bubble. And you know, I've tried to, as much as I can, get other people's to look at the game and other people's opinions of the game. But you never really know if something's going to work with someone.
Yeah.
You know, until they actually try it. So I'm very curious to see, you know, obviously, like one of the reasons I contact you is because I'm also curious to see what people who really liked Chibi Robo experience and take away from the game, because it is that sort of parallel thing where it's like it's inspired by it, but it's not trying to do Chibi Robo 2.0 or something. Like but it's still got that heart and that DNA from that game. And I feel like, you know, especially nowadays where obviously we're not getting new Chibi Robo games, I feel like no one pretty much has tried to do something like this in that way, where it's trying to replicate what Chibi Robo did as well.
Yeah.
I'm hopeful that, you know, especially when we're so drenched in AAA games, this is something that's refreshing.
Yeah.
This is something that, you know, we kind of want to see put into the world. So I don't know, it's interesting. Like it's been a big change for me because, like I said, like development wrapped up recently. I recently went back to my old job in a new position, and like that in itself has just been a big life change. Like, you know, working for myself for over 3 years and being my own boss, and then suddenly I have another boss.
Yeah.
And you know, and then like, but like, you know, I'm still working on the game. Like literally this is my morning, and I'm still, you know, doing stuff for it between jobs. So
Yeah.
it's something that I'm always working on. I'm excited to close this chapter of things, but I'm also like not ready to let go at the same time. So I think my best reward and what I've gotten from other projects is just the joy of seeing what people think of it, good and bad. Like I'm genuinely excited and curious to see. Like I am definitely the person who sees probably the most flaws in the game than other people would see. So like that stuff won't be surprising to me, but I'm just curious, you know, how it turns out and what people take away from it.
Yeah. Maybe you already answered this, but I'd be curious to know, like, if you were to look back on this project so far, at the very least, what do you think you are most proud of out of the whole project?
Honestly, I mean, the fact that I was able to do it at all.
Yeah.
Like especially the way we did it and how we were able to secure grants, how we were able to make this as big as it was. Like when I started it, was not expecting it to be unfold the way that it did. And I think the proudest thing that I have about the game is just the impact it's had on people already.
Yeah.
Like I've had multiple people play it and cry, and like I've always wanted to make a game that makes people cry, so that's great. And I just feel like it's so easy to stumble in game development where you've got a good intention, you've got a good heart, but then maybe a mechanic doesn't work as well as it does, or something goes wrong. But I feel like we've tried to balance things in a certain way that hopefully that the expectations to players isn't that it's going to be a super mechanic and gameplay driven experience, but then it's also going to come out as something that maybe is a bit more than they expected.
Yeah.
So I'm hopeful that it's just a game that people remember and look back on and be like, oh, that was a really fun little thing that really surprised me.
I think every single time I talk to somebody about like how to get into the game industry, it is always just do something neat, and eventually an opportunity might show up at some point. And I think it's kind of fun that like a Jurassic Park game apparently led to the spiritual successor, or one of the spiritual successors. There's another game called Go-Robo, kind of cropping up around Chibi Robo and things like that. But yeah, I think the thing that I thought was most interesting in trying to look at this game is how do you tell a positive message, tell a positive story in a way that, has an impact, right? Like what is the purpose of creating this kind of story? And a lot of times I think it is to help the user kind of, get through a moment or kind of reflect on something in their life. But how do you get them to like genuinely reflect on something versus just telling them it's all right? Like there's kind of different ways to help someone going through like a hard time, and very rarely telling them directly what to do actually helps. I feel like it is more about like them taking time to reflect on exactly what they want and like how to move forward, and like what's around them, right? In the case of this game, it's kind of, I think the idea being that if you're different, you feel alone in the world, right? And then so it's kind of narratively, it feels like a game that's kind of like, hey, you're different, and that does not make you alone, though. That like just makes you, and everybody else has a little bit of difference in them and things like that. There's a lot of societal pressures to be within a certain narrow band of what we think is like the best version of ourselves. And, I think depends on who you are, I guess. But in my opinion, very rarely is kind of forcing people to fit within that band a very helpful thing that leads to a happy life. I could be wrong about that. I'm a 35-year-old man at this point, so still more for me to learn. But yeah, I think sometimes it's hard to know, how to do that and how to like tell that story and how to like genuinely comfort somebody without coming off as like inauthentic kind of thing, right? So anytime you want to make like a difference in the world, I think the answer is just live your life and do what you want to do, and try your best to, help people as you can, rather than like, necessarily telling them what to do kind of thing, right? I think one thing that kind of comes up sometimes with these kind of games is like, how intentional is this? I think in the case of Misc, based off my impression of what we talked about with Michael, it seems like a very intentional message. But I also think there are other games that message, even if it's there, is not necessarily intentional, right? I think everybody's going to build games based around their worldview and things like that. And so even if Michael didn't specifically, pursue the idea, the game would probably still reflect that in some way, if that's something, he truly believes. I think the one thing I wish I asked a little bit more about was the idea of like, how do you align that vision between multiple people? Obviously, this is a very small team of 3 people, but even then, coordinating 3 people to kind of focus on what you want something to be, I'd be curious to know like exactly what that process looked like and things like that. But anyways, look, you can check out the video game yourself right now on the Nintendo Switch. I thought it was pretty cute. I thought it was pretty fun. I enjoyed it. I definitely came away pleasantly surprised by the game itself. I think it is just, again, I think if you want kind of a feel-good story, it's a really good example of that. If you just want something that's like very, got like a little slight innocent sense of humor, but it's also very fun in that way. So it's also going to be out on Steam. The day you're hearing this, it's not on Steam yet. It'll be a week later, but in the grand scheme of things, it will be out fairly soon if you want to play it on PC. And if you're curious about like the development of the game further, Michael had done a variety of YouTube videos kind of talking about the development process on the Misc Tiny Tale YouTube channel. So I'll link, all that stuff below so you can check it out.